good people?
What's up, good people, and welcome to the Elephant Wisdom Podcast. This is your podcast for motivation, inspiration, and domination. So, dominate or don't, it is purely up to you. I am your host, Hark Jos L, CEO of Sons of Spphillips. Before we dive in, make sure to like, follow, and subscribe so you never miss an episode filled with the wisdom you need to take charge of your life. Now, let's talk about today's guest. Someone who embodies resilience, positive outlook, and the power of manifestation. I am talking about my new best friend, Kirstine Openshaw, a top producing realtor and owner of Openshaw Realty Group in the Dallas-Fort Worth, Texas area. Kirstine's journey is nothing short of incredible. She moved to Texas with maybe just one or two suitcases, built a thriving business, and overcame challenges that would normally break most people down to the very last compound. Immigration struggles, infertility, and her son's congenital heart disease. Through it all, she's learned the secrets of manifesting success and pushing through adversity. In this episode, we are unpacking the mindset shifts, habits, and strategies that helped her win, not just in real estate, but in life. So if you ever felt like the odds were stacked against you, this conversation is for you. And before we begin, I must let you know, this episode of the Elephant Wisdom Podcast is brought to you by Sons of Spphillips. Sons of Spphillips is an online boutique that sells new and slightly used designer and name brand clothing and accessory. Also sells custom t-shirts, sweatshirts, and accessories and more. We give style and attitude a dress code, motivated by the people, inspired by the culture, $1 million style for the $100 man. Go to www.sonsofspphillips.com where you can get up to 70% off and more on clothing and apparel and accessories. And any sales over $45 gets free shipping, which means I pay for the shipping, so you can't lose. Go to www.sonsofspphillips.com. Get there today. Also follow us on IG, Facebook, and X at Sons of SPP. That way you can see the new items that we're putting in our store, and you can also stay up to date with some news and information on the Elephant Wisdom Podcast. Well, hey, Kirsten, how are you today?
I'm doing good. How are you?
I'm doing good. I am really excited to have you on the Elephant Wisdom Podcast today.
Yes, I'm excited to be here. I appreciate the time.
Okay, good. We do really appreciate you reaching out. For those that don't know, Kirsten reached out to us on LinkedIn, and she wanted to be on the Elephant Wisdom Podcast, which, in my opinion, for a podcaster, this is my opinion, is the utmost form of flattery that I can think of, because it lets you know that your message and your word is getting out there and people are paying attention to your content. So I just want to thank you for reaching out. We appreciate you, and just looking forward to getting to know you and, for our listeners to get to know you and get to know you a little better, because we already know each other. We've talked. So
Yes, no, definitely. Yeah. I love kind of researching other podcasters that are putting content out there, and I always feel the need, like anybody I resonate with or that's doing a great job, I want to connect, keep building that circle of good people.
Well, thank you. Again, like I said, we appreciate that here. So why don't you just tell us a little bit about yourself? I gave everybody a little intro about you, but just give them a little bit more.
Yeah, of course. So, I came over here like late 2006. A lot of people don't know, I really came over here on a whim. I actually had a lady that owed me a ton of money for work that I had done, and I could tell that was never going to come my way. And so I just asked her up front one day, I said, what are we going to do about this? Because what I've done is done. And she suggested I just come over and stay with them for 6 months. Her husband was a horse clinician. He did clinics and lessons and trainings. And that was absolutely something I was focused on at that time. And she said, do you want to just come over and trade it out? Like, don't pay for clinics and trade it out. And sure, absolutely, let's do it. And it was kind of funny because maybe 2 weeks before that conversation with her, I randomly had a gypsy fortune teller at my house.
Oh, really?
And very random. Not how people usually do their whole life plan.
Right.
And she she goes, yeah, I see that you're going to move to somewhere called Texas. Do you know that? And I was like, no, I've never even thought of Texas. I've never spent any time looking at anything about Texas. I grew up all in the Middle East. So my world had been like the UK and the Middle East. And so she says that, and she goes, yeah, you're going to go over there and get married, but that's not going to work great. And I was like, oh, cool. Awesome. This
Wow.
sounds fun.
Something to look forward to.
Right. Yes. Me. Future failed relationship. Don't we all want that on the card? So I, combined that with the conversation with the lady that owed me some money. And I was like, you know what? She lives in Texas, or she was moving to Texas. She's from England too. And it just seemed like everything kind of aligned. And I went, you know what? Screw it. Like, what's the worst that could happen? It doesn't go well and I come home and I have a cool story. Let's do it. So I was in the immigration line at the embassy like a week later, got a 6-month visa, and was flying out here. I booked a round trip knowing that I wasn't going to use the return flights, and got married 3 months later.
Okay.
And that, shock horror did not work out. And 5 years later, her premonition or whatever came true. And I was filing divorce. And yeah, it kind of just, those first 5 years here just flew by. Of course, it was a huge culture shock. My lifestyle was extremely different then to what it is now, including my mindset, which I know we'll talk about a little more in a bit. That was a huge 180 from where I am now. And just everything that kind of went down in that trial marriage, as I call it, really set me up to kind of see the other side from where I am now. And I actually went back to England for a year and was like, I'm just going to test this out and see if I could move back here or not. Because by that point, I had a green card and I had the option to stay in the US. And I went back, and it was the wettest year in 70 years.
Wow.
And Texas had been in a drought for like the entire 5 years I was here. So I went from never seeing rain to always being in the rain every single day. And I was like, you know what? I'm seeing friends, I'm seeing family, I'm spending time with them. However, everything was this huge rush. Everything was like, you got to see people in the cracks of time. And nobody was prioritizing time with friends. Nobody was prioritizing like goals and dreams, and everybody was just working. And it was this real kind of eye-opener to me, having, just finalized the divorce. And I was like, no, I'm changing how things go from here. I'm not living that life anymore.
Yeah.
And it was just shocking. It was kind of shocking because, of course, I love my friends that I've known there my whole life. And, of course, it was great to see them. But it all felt so rushed. It all felt like we got to hurry up and do this. And then, of course, the weather would you'd make all these wonderful plans and then it would downpour and you couldn't see everybody as you had planned or whatever it was. And it was just a bit of an eye-opener to me of, I just want more than that. And I started dating someone who's now my husband. Okay. And we actually knew each other in high school and hated each other. So I was the epitome of the tomboy horse girl, of course. And, had shaved back my head, like the whole 9 yards. And he was the English equivalent of a jock. He would date the English equivalent of cheerleaders and all this stuff. He had all these like very well put together girlfriends. And I was like, no, I'm over here in my jods and I've got hay in my hair. And, I was not from the same mold at all. And so we actually started dating and everybody, all my childhood friends were like, are you crazy? What is going on? I was like, well, you know what? We've both just finished trial marriages. We both have talked through our goals and dreams in great detail. Everything we want aligns. Like he was really thinking a lot bigger than anybody else that I knew at that time. And it just felt like all the stars aligned. And we both knew that what we wanted, we couldn't get there. We couldn't make that happen in the UK. And he had always lived like within 1 or 2 streets of his family. So when I was like, you know what, I'm going to go back to the US. And if this is going to work between us, obviously you're going to have to be there too. Right. And so we started the process. I stayed there for a year to get the max time. I got a advanced parole, they call it, on your immigration status. So I had advance parole to be allowed to go home for that year, with restrictions. And so when I came back here, I was starting on my own, like truly on my own, truly, no partner, no anything over here. And we just kind of did long distance really for 4 years. And then we sprinkled a couple of, challenges in the mix. We knew we wanted kids. We knew that we were going to have to do IVF. And so we actually did IVF while living long distance, because we also had the hopes that immigration wasn't going to take as long as it ended up taking. And just through some hiccups with immigration, I actually got declined the first time that I applied for citizenship. So that was a little hurdle. And we went through IVF twice while he was living in the UK and I was over here. And just, all the hormones and all the stuff that goes with that was an interesting challenge. And then he eventually moved over here 2016. He got his green card, booked a flight almost immediately, and came over. And in true fashion, we didn't just land and go, we're just going to relax now. We put our house on the market that we had bought while we were long distance. And he was like, well, how long is it going to take to sell? Like, do we have time for me to sit for a minute and live in our house that we've owned for 4 years and I've never lived in it yet? I was like, yeah, of course. Everything in this market takes a year to sell. And it sold in 28 days. And it was a lot faster than we were expecting. And that kind of jolted us into our move in the city that we have now. And that's when we just launched into real estate. And, I knew doing what I had been doing wasn't going to get me what we wanted. And the whole move over here was to get our dream life and our goals. And, Clive and I talked and I was like, it's not going to get there working a 9 to 5. It's not going to get there on someone else's salary, making their stuff happen. So I took the leap, and I had never done a sales job before. I'd never done a commissions only job before. And I got my real estate license, and, we did it all in the midst of the move. Our house had sold. It sold really quick. It closed really fast. I mean, I told him it would take, a year or so. I really thought it was going to take at least 6 months, and he'd have some time to kind of hit the ground and relax for a minute after everything. And that was not the case. It sold in 28 days or something, around a month. And then we kind of put our panic shoes on, because we're like, okay, it sold really fast. We haven't even started looking for a house. We don't know where we're moving to. And through a friend of a friend, through the horse world, very randomly, it's funny how these things kind of come together. I had a friend that said, you know what, I've got a toy hauler, a fifth wheel that you could take go-karts and stuff in or whatever. And she goes, I've got one of those on my property. You guys can come stay in it if you want to figure something out. I was like, well, we don't have any other options right now. So I guess that's what we're doing. So we were basically camping in her front yard while we tried to figure out where we were going to live. And in the midst of that, I enrolled in real estate classes. Okay. And I was like, why not? And Clive got a job over in Fort Worth, which was at that time an hour or so from us. And, he was a custom home builder in the UK. So he came over here, and most of the custom home builders are family owned or big corporations. And he didn't want to do the same thing. He wanted to get in something different. So he started with a company in Fort Worth that did flips and remodels. I got into the real estate, got my license. We were limited down to one car. We had all these excuses that could have really derailed our plans. But at the time, we just knew that everything we had talked about, everything that we had done this 4-year long distance for, was bigger than just doing 9 to 5s for other people. And so I think that just kept us going in terms of not letting it stop us, not letting it shut us down, and kind of getting caught up in this is too hard, because I had other people that were doing their licensing at the same time as me and started at the same time. And they're like, well, how are you going to do showings if you don't have a car? It's I don't know. I guess I'll figure it out, And same thing, the universe seems to just have your back when you're thinking that way. And, I heard a quote once where it was don't do things in order to be happy. Be happy in order for those things to be able to happen. And looking back on it, I realized that's essentially what we were doing at that time. And it almost creates this option of the or this feeling, I should say, of the universe having your back,
Right.
because things just kept working for us. And we didn't really know why. Like, we had a friend that's just called out of the blue from like a previous life of doing horse training for me in a different world. And she just called and she goes, "Hey, do you guys need to borrow a car?"
Wow.
I'm like, "How in the world would you know that we need to borrow a car right now?" And they just lent me this basically brand new Wrangler Jeep, which was super fun to just kind of bum around in. And that's how I did my showings. That's how I launched my real estate business, just the universe kind of having my back in that way. And I think so much of it is people just look for excuses and they want to sell themselves on those excuses as the reason why things are too hard or they're not going to work. And that just really wasn't an option for us. We had uprooted our entire lives. We were 5,000 miles away from both sides of our family. We had just moved to this city that was an hour away from where I had been living. So I knew nobody here. Clive knew nobody here. And it wasn't an option for us to sell ourselves those excuses of why it couldn't work. And I think when you do that, you can trick your brain into only looking for the options that fix things, right? And then that turns into, it feels like the universe just has my back and everything just works
Right.
out. And that's really kind of what kickstarted our real estate world. And then, of course, we finally found our house, which was a whole comedy in itself because this is a huge
Right.
house. It was just the two of us. And we didn't, I mean, I came over here with one suitcase and he came over here with a couple things. And eventually we had shipping arrive with stuff from his house, but we didn't bring furniture. We didn't bring anything like that. We couldn't bring electronics because it's different electronic, system over here. And so we literally came over with like just mementos and a couple of those kind of things, nothing big. And we bought a huge house and it was pretty much empty. My little house that we had up in Graham, Texas was like 1,400, 1,500 square foot. And it was all a mishmash of used furniture and free stuff. And then we buy this house and it literally fit into one room.
Wow.
And we're like, well, what do we do here then? And I mean, even the showing of the house was hysterical because I walk around and I'm always thinking future. I'm always thinking like, what could this look like? And the whole time we're walking around this house, my husband was looking at me like I had lost my mind. He's like, "Why are you pretending you like this house?" I was like, "This house is amazing. Just think of the potential. We're going to rip down these walls. We're going to do this. We're going to vault this ceiling." And he's like, "Why are you pretending you like this? We're not living in this house. We're not buying this house." And I should set the scene. This was a full hoarding situation in this house. Like, the person that lived here had not even been upstairs in 12 years through like physical limitations. Wow. This was a full-blown gut job remodel, like huge project. And I was excited about it because we were going to get it for a great price. And he saw all the work that he was going to have to do to this house. And we ended up getting it because, happy wife, happy life and all that stuff.
Oh, yeah.
So we got this house.
Oh, yeah.
That comes true. And it was an ordeal. Let's just say that. It's still an ordeal. We're almost done. But just to add like some spice to it, we decided, right, real estate started off really well. I sold 16 homes in my first year in the first 5 months. And it just really took off, and that in itself was a really good kind of aha moment that so many of the realtors I was in the trainings with and that they were starting out the same time as me, they're getting business from like their churches or their communities or their neighbors. Well, we live on 22 acres. We don't know our neighbors. Right. I'm not seeing anyone when I check the mail. We're not, going to real local events and things because we had decided to throw in the mix of things another IVF cycle. Right. So we were doing IVF in Dallas. So every spare minute outside of real estate and launching that business, I'm driving an hour and a half, hour and 45 minutes over to Dallas to the clinic. And, a couple of times during that cycle, it was almost daily. It was at least once or twice a week. And that's a lot of time out of your week to be doing things like that. And of course, Clive's working full time like crazy. He's getting promotions left, right, and center. Well, that first year was an absolute roller coaster between starting the business, buying the house, gutting the house, trying to make it livable. It was insanity. And then the IVF worked. So then we threw a pregnancy in the mix just to kind of make sure we weren't getting too complacent and not too busy.
Like you didn't already have enough going on.
Right. We're fighting with immigration for him. I've still been declined from my citizenship. I mean, it was just, when you look back, I'm like, holy cow, how did we ignore this like massive storm of chaos that we were in? And we were like, no, this is working. We're fine. This is all going to what we want. Because I see people now that have, and of course it's perception based, so I'm not belittling what they're going through, but they'll come to me and say, I have this problem and I just can't possibly get through it. I can't possibly go sell a house right now when I have this happening. And I look and I'm like, oh, honey, that wouldn't even have registered as a problem with us because our vision was so big and our focus was so just blinkered on this is what we came over here for. This is what we moved here for. We were not about to move 5,000 miles from family and leave everybody that we knew behind, especially Clive, because I had kind of been here for the, that 5-year span. Right. He was completely abandoning everything and everybody he knew, including this huge business he stood to inherit from his father. We were not moving over here and then letting one little thing derail us from our goal, right? And so it was just this kind of crazy turmoil of, it was exciting at the time. It was hard at the time. We're pregnant. We had been through all this stuff with IVF. We had to pay for that out of pocket. That's like 50 grand that we had to pay out of pocket because we didn't have insurance. I'm self-employed. He was 1099. So we were living the American healthcare dream, of everything's expensive. And, it was just, we had all these options of excuses that we could have chosen to take and run with. And it ended up, obviously the pregnancy worked. We now have a 6-year-old, almost 7-year-old. But about 13 weeks into the pregnancy, we found out there was a problem. And another thing that could have just been that stick in the wheel of causing an issue, right? And long story short, we went to lots and lots of specialists. We found out that he had essentially half a heart. He was going to be born with hypoplastic right heart syndrome. And that means that he pretty much doesn't have a right ventricle, which is like a quarter of your heart. And it affects everything in his plumbing with the heart. And, they gave us options. They were like, what do you want to do? Do you want to terminate? You want to just come in and talk to us about it? So, of course, we went in and we talked and we were trying to get understandings of what's his life expectancy? What's this going to look like? Like, what's his quality of life going to be? And all of these things. And there's like no research on this stuff. They really couldn't tell us. Outside of he's going to have 3 major open heart surgeries, they really couldn't tell us anything. They were like, we hope that he will get to like 20 or 30 years old before he needs a transplant, but we really won't know. And so, we had to have more conversations and we had to have, big conversations about what this was going to look like for us and if we wanted to go down this road. And ultimately we did, because this was our 3rd IVF at this point. So we knew that we weren't going to give up. Like, it's just not in our nature to give up. Right. That's really what it came down to. And so we weren't going to choose that option. And of course, when he was born, it was all go. It was all go. It was an emergency C-section. My body absolutely hates being pregnant. Right. Absolutely hates it. Like, the whole thing was just, I speak to ladies all the time. And of course, you've got different edges of that field of, you have some people that are also in the same bucket as what we were and they were struggling. And then you have other people that they can just look at their partner and get pregnant. Right. And then they're like, you have these people like, pregnancy is beautiful. Pregnancy is wonderful. It was miserable for me. It was probably one of the hardest things I've ever gone through, even on top of all the other stuff. And so I had preeclampsia and I forget what my blood pressures were. It was like 200 over something. The doctor was like, how did you drive here? And I was like, yeah, it was interesting. I couldn't really see. Like, it was this whole thing. And so he's born 5 or 6 days old. He had his first open heart surgery. He was teeny tiny. And from there on, we pretty much lived in the hospital for the first 6 months of his life and was doing, Clive was still working. I was still doing real estate. We were just kind of juggling. And we got really good at balancing, like, okay, whose turn is it? Because we had one incident, we had several incidents, but our main incident was he went in for a routine cath, so routine heart catheterization, however you say that. And he coded the following morning, like right at about 6 a.m. And it ultimately was due to, I had a lot of the nurses overnight telling me, like, you're just a nervous mama. It's just your first kid. This is what they do. This is how they are. You just need to tell yourself to calm down. And I'll always remember, I was like, this just isn't sitting right with me. This just doesn't feel right. Like, one, it's not in my nature to go sit in the corner and calm down. And two, it just didn't feel right. Like, he was only 2 months old at that point. He was literally 2 months old the morning that he coded. And I was like, we don't know him because he's a 2-month-old. Nobody knows somebody after 2 months, right? But we had a good feeling for how he behaved as this tiny baby. And sure enough, like, I was stood by his, ICU bed. He was in the cardiac ICU, and this doctor walks past, and I guess the look on my face was like, you need to get your butt in here immediately. And he looked at me and he goes like this, like, you want me to come in there? And I just looked at him and went, yeah. And he came in, and the second he stepped over that threshold, Lincoln coded.
Wow. And
his heart stopped. And so he came in, he's doing CPR, and I don't know how many people were in that tiny room. I mean, it was like an oversized closet, this hospital room. It was tiny, but I bet we had every bit of 18, 20 people in there. And of course, Clive shows up because he was coming in before he started work at 7 a.m. He was doing 12, 14-hour days. He shows up, all this chaos. I couldn't even get across the room to where my phone was to give him a shout and tell him, like, what was going on. I thought I had sent him a text, but I had actually ended up texting another friend of mine whose name started with the same letter. And I had, recent text, I just hit her name. So he didn't even know coming up. He didn't even know this was happening. So, this all happened, and we just landed ourselves a really long ICU stay. We didn't get out of there until he was right around 6 months old.
Okay.
He's had a couple of extra surgeries since then. His biggest last surgery was when he was 3 years old. And through all of this, we had COVID. So during COVID, Clive's boss was wonderful. But of course, our kid has zero immune system. He has, if he gets sick, it totally wipes him out, and he can't afford to work that hard with his heart. So they started asking Clive to come back into work. And, we had a conversation of, listen, what's the risks here? What's the pros and cons? And it really just didn't outweigh it for him to go back to work. So we were making enough money in the real estate world that we didn't need his income anymore. And we were extremely fortunate in that we had gotten it to a point where it was so consistent, because I know that's a challenge for a lot of realtors. The roller coaster ride of being self-employed and all that. And he quit, and our business just took off. Just having him available so much more just took off. We were closing around 50 houses a year. It was just crazy. And then Lincoln finally had his third open heart surgery when he was 3. And our plan had been to do IVF after his surgery for a second kid. We always had, like, part of our whole goal had been 2 kids. And he got sick at, like, the school that he was going to. He got sick. So we had his surgery scheduled, best laid plans and all. The universe was like, well, let's just throw a little twist in here and see how you feel about this, as it does. And we had already scheduled our IVF. I was already starting the injections, the daily meds, everything. And his surgery gets postponed because he had a cold. And we ended up doing the whole IVF before his heart surgery. And we were leaving on Sunday, either Saturday or Sunday evening, to drive down to Houston. His hospital that he now sees for his cardiac care is like 5-6 hours away. And so we were going to drive down there. I believe we were either going to drive through the night or start at like 3 a.m. I forget. I know it was late. And Friday, I go in, I have a blood test to check for, like, the pregnancy and things. And we get a call Friday, like lunchtime. We're unpacking. We're getting ready to leave, like, that weekend for Lincoln's surgery on Monday morning. and they tell us the IVF worked and we were pregnant and we were, ready to start this roller coaster again. So we're doing his open heart surgery. Of course, we hadn't told hardly anybody we were doing IVF. We weren't going to. My side of the family is not the same picture book as Clive's side of the family. I'll put it that way. That. And so it was not, there's a lot of that. And so we were not openly sharing that we were spending the money on our IVF. We didn't want people involved that weren't going to be happy for us. And so we were going through all of this very quietly. Like we were still operating the business. We had listings. We had clients. It was still busy. I had lots of agents helping us, especially while we were down in Houston. And so, Monday morning comes, he's getting prepped for surgery. And we're like, they're coming in and doing x-rays in his room multiple times a day. And I'm like, well, I can't be in the room while he's having x-rays. I can't do this stuff. And of course, the doctors know me down there. They're like, why are you not in the room? Why are you not bedside like normal? So we had to tell them, well, they're so amazing at Texas Children's Hospital. Like, I cannot sing their praises enough. They're like, well, go downstairs and have ultrasounds. Did you get to have your ultrasounds? I was like, no, we found out Friday. And then they wanted us to come in for ultrasounds Monday, Tuesday, and we're here. So they hooked me up. I got to have videos done. I got color ultrasounds. Like, it was very cool. And we were down there for like a month. I think they had planned on his surgery and his recovery taking 2 weeks. And it ended up being a month, and we had to stay close for 2 weeks because we lived so far away. They didn't want us on the drive home and something happening. So it was kind of chaotic because, of course, I've got the doctors up here wanting us up here. They're wanting us to look after Lincoln down there. So it was just another one of those, looking back, what a hurdle that could have been. And we really just didn't give ourselves the option to see it as that at the time. And it's just, hindsight's 2020. And at the time when you're in the thick of it, we didn't know how much we were working on our mindset. We didn't know how much we were focusing on not allowing that to take control of our lives. And, there's an expression now that I say regularly, multiple times a day, usually, is my mind is not my friend. Your mind is just not your friend. Your mind is designed to keep you alive. Your mind is looking for all the scary things, all the negative things, all the things that could kill you, back from our caveman days. Right. And it's just having that mindfulness of that and then keeping control of it, to not let it take you down that dark path of, well, what happens if this? What happens if that? Like, we had lots of people rooting for us with Lincoln, and when they found out we were pregnant with Quinn. And it was so interesting to me because they'd be like, congratulations, but I'm so glad he's doing well, but, what if this happens? What if that happens? And I'm like, I thought you were calling me to make me feel better. And now you're trying to instill, not intentionally, of course, right. They didn't even have any idea they were doing it. But now you're installing fears. Now you're giving me your fears because you want to feel better by offloading them. And I was very aware of that. And so, again, Clive and I have always had a relationship based very strongly on communication. And I'll say to him, like, you're going to have to field these calls. You're going to have to manage my Facebook. Right. You're going to have to deal with comments. You're going to have to protect my mindset in this. Because, of course, I already knew I was a little compromised because of hormones. Right. And so I was like, I can't, and he would have to almost police me, and he'd see my mindset spiral if I was getting on social media too much, where I was getting onto, different research tangents and rabbit holes. Right. And he'd carefully, because my personality, he'd be like, are you sure you want to be reading that right now? Are you sure we need to research all the, the death rates of this right now, or the complications of that right now? Because I'm wired that way, where I want to know every scenario so that I can be as best prepared as possible. And sometimes those studies that you start reading are not good. Right. They are not good for your health. And so, it was an interesting time. And of course, Quinn was born. He's nearly 3. He's absolutely insane. And he's been this breath of fresh air that we didn't even know we needed in our family, as far as, like, he's so opposite of Lincoln. Mm-hmm. And so now we're almost having to learn to be parents again, because Lincoln was not like this. Like, we did not have Lincoln has never climbed on the kitchen counter. He's nearly 7. That has never been something in his
Right.
repertoire. Quinn's been doing that for like 9 months.
Mm-hmm.
He just uses the door handles and he's like, boop, 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 up he goes. And you'll be like, where is this child? And you're looking on the floor around the counter and he's standing on the counter. So, it's interesting how different they are. And that's been something that of course, I feel like everybody does it. You compare child A to child B. And so we do when we find ourselves doing that. And we're having to really be careful of our mindset while we do that, because Lincoln's 6 and he's very aware, and his mindset is fragile, as they all are, because you never want him to feel like, oh, I should be doing more and I'm not, or I didn't do that at that age because mom and dad said I didn't. Like we work really hard not having that around him. So yeah, it's been very interesting launching this business alongside all of the chaos that I feel like a lot of people, it could have just totally derailed them,
Yeah. You guys are definitely the definition of what the Elephant Wisdom Podcast stands for when we say dominate each day. And you don't waste one day to do anything. That's what the days are for. Move forward.
Yeah.
I used to have this little motto that I had when I had another job a while ago and I wanted to quit. And I used to say, Operation Move Forward, because like you said, it's all about your mindset. What else do you want to do? And sometimes in my steps, I've caught myself being stagnant. And I'm just, because I say, what next? And then when I get that next, I say, okay, I got it. Then I have to think of something else, but I don't have anything else going on at that point until something tragic happens. And then I'm trying to sort it all back out again. And the purpose of what we should be doing is not waiting till the next tragedy or the next gap in your life. You should always have it in your head to want to move forward or have some type of goal. And having a goal and working for a goal doesn't mean you're stressing yourself out or you don't have time for your family. I mean, everything's manageable. You have to have the right mindset to manage it and not let it overtake your life. Your story is great. The one thing I wanted to kick back on, I do have a friend here in Ohio who is a real estate agent, and her and her husband was doing it for a while, and they are doing pretty good. Actually, so does our house, and they are doing pretty good. And I know her husband was a teacher, and some things were going on, and he just quit. And I said, so I was like, you guys are doing that good? He can quit teaching? She said, yeah, we don't need that income, and actually it's in the way. So I'm like, wow. So they're doing pretty good, and now he's at a point now where he's just like kind of backing her up. So they both have a license, but he just backs her up because she's doing so good, and he backs her up. If she needs him to say, hey, follow through with the carpenters or whatever, and show this house while I do this. And that's what he does. And then he's able to go handle the other things that he wants to handle that are important to him. Like he likes to coach, and he likes to he's a really good dad. He likes to really focus on his kids so they don't get caught up in a lot of the madness that's going on in society.
Yes.
So it's great that you guys have that dynamic. And even when you said that your husband you said fields calls or monitors things for you, I'm in the same boat. So
yes, it's important to have that support, and just you touched on something then, like when we were having those early bird conversations about having kids. One thing that I will always remember Clive saying, he's like, my dad's amazing. And I know his family. I worked with his mom before me and Clive started dating, and she was always one of my favorite people. And I knew his dad, and his dad's wired just like me, full road rage, like all the things. Like, it's so funny because we just get along. And he said, he goes, I love my dad. My dad's amazing. We never wanted for anything. Like, he always instilled a great work ethic in us. He said, but I don't want to be my dad when I'm a dad.
Right.
He said, I want to be home. I want my kids to know me. I want my kids to never have questions about how I feel about
Mm-hmm.
them or that I'm spending quality time with them. And, there was a lot more to the conversation, but I just remember those cliff notes of he wants to be present. And so when they called him to go back to work when Lincoln was little, I was like, it's just not an option. Is, our first conversation that at that point had probably been it had to be 7, 8 years prior. I was like, that was a priority
Mm-hmm.
then. Did something change? And Clive's like, no, I still want that. I said, then make the choice, make it happen. Like, now's the time. This is your crossroads of what do you really, did you say you wanted it and you don't really, or do you really want it? And when he handed his notice in, I think it gave him this confidence boost of, I'm going after my dreams. Like, I'm going after the things I said I wanted because I really
Yeah.
want them. And I wish more people knew to do that and knew that they could do that. And, some people go, oh, so he's just kind of like your spare agent. I'm like, no, like he backs me
Mm-hmm.
up. When I'm in that moment of overwhelm and I'm like, I've got to put this sign out, I've got to pick that sign up, I got to put lock boxes here, lock boxes there, I need this paperwork to be signed and they only wet sign, and I cannot be in every place at once, and I'm on the phone for several hours a day. There's no way. And so it's taken a lot for me to rewire myself to be like, it's okay to say, hey, can you help me with this, this, and this? I cannot do all of these things today. Can you help me? And he's learned that intuition of, hey, I saw on the calendar you have to do this, that, and the other today for signage or whatever, or the photographer's coming. I can meet them. I can go do that. And then it's just off my plate and I can focus on the other
Right.
things. And so it's huge to have that. And I know not everybody's going to have it in their business. I think for me, the moral of that like little snippet of learning was that it's okay to ask for help. And he loves to be a stay-at-home dad. He does the school runs. He gets to do everything. Him and my 2-year-old have their little routine. They go and he gets coffee. Quinn says he gets coffee. Quinn does not have coffee because he's already wired. But he'll tell everybody that listens, I get my coffee from QT. I'm like, dude, you do not get coffee. But he does get a pink sprinkled donut. And it's like their little thing, it's what they do. And it's so cool to watch that unfold, that he gets to do that. And knowing like we could have took the easy route. We could 100% have took the easy route and I could have moved
Mm-hmm.
home. I could have had all my old friends. I could have had a very plug and play life and it would have been very easy. He had a job security for life working with his family. We would have had all of his family there to help us with the kids, but we just wanted more.
Right.
And so we went after that. And I just wish more people knew like it would be so worth it if they went after it.
Yeah, you guys are a team, definitely a team, and not just a team for your business, but your team in your relationship, and that's even more valuable for a couple. Because we have a relationship podcast too, but with a lot of the conversation, especially in my culture, there's this thing about going 50-50, who pays this, who's in the lead, and all this other stuff, and some people, that's a conversation, but like in our household, we don't have to have that conversation. And I'm sure like in your household, you don't have to have that conversation. You know what's what. Hey, we got a family to take care of. We don't have time to go and debate with each other to go with this battle against man and woman, husband and wife, who does this. We don't have time to do that. And that's just added energy you're wasting on building a relationship, building a team, and achieving your goals. And I think that's one of the conflicts that a lot of relationships, my culture, any culture, whatever, in the U.S., whatever, is causing a lot of divorces because people don't know how to position themselves in their relationships. They don't know how to have the real conversations. Like you said, it took you time to say, hey, I need some help, or ask for help. And as a man, he had to sit back and say, let me help her out and understand that my position is more important doing this than it is doing this. Because at any time, I can get back up and go do that if we need it.
Yes. Yeah.
And I think your husband and like me, I don't sit at the house or sit in front of a bunch of other men and beat my chest and say, I'm the man of the house. I don't have to do that. I don't have to
Yep.
prove that to you, to prove that to anybody else.
No.
What we have in our house, we know what we know never needs to be spoken. But for some other people, like I said, they
Mm-hmm.
waste a lot of time, a lot of energy, and they put the odds against themselves when they
Yeah.
do that. So
Yeah.
I applaud you guys
They
for
just,
working that out.
yeah. No, I appreciate that. I feel like a lot of people feel like they have to label things, right? Like they have to
Yeah,
label
yeah.
that this is my boundary and I'm creating this boundary, like whether it's with clients or relationship wise or even with the kids. Like boundaries can be a good thing, but I feel like people can get so stuck with them that they don't realize they're no longer creating a boundary, they're just labeling
Yeah,
things.
yeah.
And I feel like they're labeling them like this person's being difficult to me. This person's not honoring me. This person's being a jerk right now. And I actually had this conversation with someone last week, and I was like, you do realize there are no jerks in the world until you show
Hmm.
up and you label them as such. And when you do that, all you're doing is carrying around this conflict, which is taking mental space, it's taking mental energy. Like, don't do that to
Right.
yourself. You know, it's with Lincoln. He recently had his autism diagnosis. A lot of people are like, oh, I'm so sorry. I'm like, why is that an I'm sorry thing? He's still exactly who he was the day before he had that piece of paper. Now I can research some
Hmm.
tools of how to help be on the same page as him, not change him to think like
Right.
me, but for me to be able to be on the same page as him. So, like, immediately, even in offering condolences, people didn't realize they were labeling that as a
Yeah.
sorry. They were labeling
Yeah.
that as a pitiful problem. And of course, in their hearts, I know that's not what they meant, but it's how they're
Hmm.
wired. And they haven't gained that awareness yet to kind of question that and say, maybe I shouldn't label it as this. Maybe I shouldn't label that person's child as a difficult child or whatever it might be. And it's just a lack of awareness that people are doing this in every aspect. Like they're labeling, well, he earns the money, so I get an allowance. It's just not how our household
Right. Right.
runs because we're very much just everything's joint. Like we are a unit. Like I feel like when you start a business or you start a family, like you're opting all in. And there's such a almost like a pandemic really of people not going all in on what they want, not going all in on what they believe in. And sometimes that's just something really simple like self-belief.
Right.
There's so many people that have no self-belief and no self-confidence, and they don't realize like nobody can give that to
Hmm.
them. Nobody can take it away from them and nobody can give it to them. It's 100% self-made. And it's not until they start choosing to believe in themselves and choosing to do the things that it takes to be able to rewire yourself to see yourself that way, it's not going to change. It's not going to get any better. And I mean, I talk to realtors all the time, and they're like, well, my business is just this, and this client's being this, and this client's being that. And I'm like, well, hold up. Where's your self responsibility in
Right.
this? And they go, what do you mean? I'm like, well, the way you're relaying this story to me is it's everybody else's fault. It's your business, isn't it? It's your choice to take on these clients. It's your choice to do this career. So where is your self-responsibility for showing up and labeling these clients as difficult? Where is your self-responsibility for showing up and labeling it that it's all the market's fault? It's not my
Right.
fault. No, it's your choice. You chose this career in this path. It's your choice. You went after working with those clients, or, if they are prospecting, so calling for business or whatever, you chose to set the appointment. You chose to take them on as a client and sign paperwork. If you then backed off because you didn't have the self-belief that, hey, I need to price this house right, it's not now automatically the market's fault or the seller's fault that they're not being realistic on a price. That's your fault because you had a lack in self-belief that rolled over into you couldn't explain yourself correctly, explain the market correctly, whatever the situation might be. And then the house just sits because you weren't honest and basically confident enough to be upfront with them
Right.
and say, this is what it's gonna take to sell the house. this number that you would love, I get it. That's just not going to make it happen right now. And whatever the industry is, I think that happens so often.
Mm-hmm.
And then the business owner is getting overwhelmed, and the business owner is getting, wound up and burnt out because they're like, well, nobody's doing what I want them to do. No one's listening to me. Well, no, it's self-responsibility. You're allowing yourself to feel that. You're allowing yourself to label it like that. Like when Lincoln has a meltdown, I can choose to jump right in there, but it is up to me how I choose to respond. Why would anybody want to choose to be stressed all the time?
Right.
And people do it every day.
A lot of what you're saying reminds me of a book that I read by Joyce Myers. Battlefield is the Mind.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
And
I don't think I've read that.
It's a really good book. She's a minister, but I heard about the book. I was watching a podcast, and there's a comedian named Godfrey, and he was talking about different books that he reads, and he read that one. And I've seen Joyce Myers on TV preaching or whatever. So I picked up the book because he was just saying about your mindset and how you think about things, and that goes out to the universe and it comes back. And you set, and it sets a precedence, and the universe will reward you if you have a positive mindset. So, and I was going to ask, I'm like, did you read that book? Because a lot of what you're spitting out sounds a lot like from that book. And it has a lot of spiritual, religious context to it, but a lot of it, she said, it's all in your mindset. It's what you think. And like, the one thing that sticks out for me is she had this story where she said she bought this red dress, and she wanted this red dress, and she had to have it. And she spent so much money on and got it. And for the longest, it sat hanging in her closet because she didn't have anywhere to wear it, but she had to have it. So come to find out, the purpose of her having that dress, she ended up giving it to somebody who worked for her because they needed it for something. So she gave them the dress, and then, she wasn't very happy about it because she still wanted the dress, but eventually the dress came back, and there was a whole bunch of other things in there, but she said the thing about it was the purpose of the dress may not have been for her. The purpose of the dress might have been for the person who needed it. And it was this whole other story about it, but the dress came back, and she said it was worn and everything, but the mindset of it, that, and how she put it all in formation was just very interesting, and just how things manifested for her and how she thinks things through. And just like I said, everything that you're kind of saying, just like, man, she must have read that book. But yeah, she has a series of them.
No, there's some. Oh, that's cool. I have to look that up. But there's so, and that's the other thing, is like there's so much good information out there, and I think people allow themselves to choose to be overwhelmed and choose to be stressed, and then they tell themselves they don't have time.
Yeah.
And the flip side of that is there's this whole mindset of self-care, and self-care, I think, is viewed so wrong as a whole. Because I think a lot of people, when you think about self-care as it is in like this day and age, a lot of people will look at that and say, well, that's like a spa day or a massage or a weekend retreat. And that's, to me, that is not self-care. Yeah. Self-care is choosing to be selfish. It's choosing to learn how to be better. It's choosing to look after yourself, like mind, body, soul, the whole 9 yards. Right. Because if you think about it, I am the center of the universe for my family, right? My kids, if you were to ask them what's the most important thing in your world, they'll probably say me. Depending on the mood, they might say dad. We're their center of the universe. So if I don't choose to look after myself, mindset-wise, where I'm not overwhelmed when there's upset, like if the 2-year-old's upset, does it help if I jump in there and start screaming and shouting too? No. Right? I've got to be mentally in a place where I can choose to go, okay, what is going on here? Is he hungry? Is he tired? Does he need a hug? Right. What is it? Or I can choose to get down on the floor and roll around with him, and that's not going to help, right? I have to choose to be selfish to protect my mental capacity with that. I have to make sure that I'm feeling good enough I can play with them physically. Did I eat today? Like, how many moms do I talk to that are like, well, I haven't eaten today. Why not? What's the self-martyrdom with
Yeah.
that? Why are you not choosing to look after yourself? It's not a dirty word to be selfish because people are relying on you. If you're like the head of the household, if you're the income earner, if you're the main parent, like it's important. Like Clive the other day, his back has issues from when he was bricklaying, days and days and days on end. And he twinged it. And I was like, well, go to the chiropractor. He goes, well, I don't have time. I said, who said you don't have time? You're self-employed. Your time is your own. Who says you don't have time? You would rather put yourself in a position where you hurt and then you're going to take that out on the kids because you're going to be upset and you're going to be hurting and don't jump on me and don't play. Why is it the kid's fault that you didn't choose
Absolutely.
self-care? Because that's how it's rolling downhill, right? And so we're just really aware of that in our house, that it is unacceptable to pass that on and be negative and throw out negativity because you're, hangry. How glorified is hangry? Because you didn't have the self-responsibility to go eat. I mean, we teach our kids to eat when they're hungry. How are you like a grown adult and go, well, I forgot to eat? No, you chose not to because you chose to get yourself in this position and you chose to just spew negativity because now you're hangry. That's not acceptable. Like, have the self-responsibility to be like, okay, yes, I am going to take these 5 minutes. I'm going to wake up earlier. I'm going to do this. I'm up at 5 a.m. My morning routine is gold. Like, I do not renegotiate my morning routine because it all rolls downhill. If I don't do what I've planned every morning, it rolls downhill. I can let myself feel behind. I can let myself feel overwhelmed. And so I know for me, I'm a better person when I do it. I'll tell other people, yeah, I'm up at 5 a.m. They're like, oh my God, I could never. And my inner voice, I don't say this out loud because it's up to them where they're at in their life, right? It's their choice. My inner voice is like, well, I'm sorry you don't value being the best person you can be for your family.
Right.
I do.
Right.
And that's really what it comes out. Of course, I would never say that straight to them because I know, I'm here to meet people where they're at when they're at that spot. And however they show up, I'm fine with it. I'm going to choose to look for the good in whatever they're doing in that moment because I don't see the point in hunting for the negative.
Right.
I don't see how that helps me.
That's been an uphill battle. Well, it was an uphill battle earlier for us in our relationship because my wife takes so much in, and that and it's there's some past trauma there, of course, and then there's a lot of her family that relies on her for a lot of things, and so when I came in, there was a lot of work I had to do, and when you talk about boundaries, we have to set boundaries outside our perimeter, not inside.
Yes.
So now there's like a mentality. She's doing good now. So there's like a mentality, not my problem. Not my problem.
Yeah. You can't fix everything. You can't save other people. You can't do the work for them. It's like we have a saying of do the hard work once. Like say Lincoln has his autistic diagnosis. He's 6 and he has absolutely massive struggles with self-regulation and reading, and he really has a hard time. And he'll say sometimes like, I'm sorry, I can't be better. I'm like, I'm sorry, what? You're trying your hardest. There is no expectation here of what you should be doing or shouldn't be doing on this calendar date, this made up calendar date that I'm going to hold you to ruin your self-confidence for life. No, like we're really big on, we set boundaries. We set expectations. But we're here, it's in our little house. Like you said, the boundaries outside, inside that boundary, we're just here to support. Like now we can build the tools to help him. We can build the tools to fix these things. But I'm not going to tear him down or really put my emotions on him. Like how many people do you talk to where they're like, well, you made me upset. I'm sorry, what? I had that kind of control over you? That is incredible. I had no idea I had superpowers.
Right.
I've heard people say to their kids, like, well, you did that and you made me upset when you do that. I'm sorry, what? That's a 3-year-old did that to you? Like, no, you don't put that kind of onus on a 3-year-old. Their brain isn't even formed yet to be able to have that kind of ability over you. And I say to Lincoln when he's like, I'm sorry, I'm not a better, reader or whatever. I'm like, you have nothing to be sorry about. I'm not sorry that you're not reading. I'm proud that you're trying. And he'll say, yeah, but I want you to be proud that I'm reading. And I'm like, it is not up to you how I feel. You can't control how I feel. I'm just proud of you because you're doing amazing. I'm proud of you because of the challenges you've overcome, and you choose to do it and make everybody laugh and be happy and just be this wonderful, happy-go-lucky kid. It is okay if you don't read a book today. That is not going to control my feelings, and you're not responsible for my feelings.
Right.
How are people going through life and just not being in control of their choice? Our mind is under our control, and so many people act like they are their mind.
Mm-hmm.
And again, our mind is not our friend. We are more than just our mind. We teach our mind. We wire our mind. So why do then we act like, okay, we do whatever our mind tells us to do? No, you program it. You tell it what you want to do. Like, you think of generational thinking that we've inherited, right? Clive's upbringing was different to mine. Our lifestyles were different. I was living in different countries in the Middle East. I was over in Abu Dhabi. I was in Cairo in Egypt. He didn't have those experiences when he was growing up. So he has a very different ideal of where you live, how you live, culturally, how things are. I grew up seeing lots of different cultures. We didn't live in the same house for more than a couple of years. We were always moving. So as an adult, I have these inherited money beliefs. I have these inherited religious beliefs. I have these inherited beliefs on what the family dynamic looks like and how long you live in a house even. And so I get itchy. I get like itchy when I'm like, okay, we've lived in this house for how long? And he's like, what's the problem with that?
Yeah.
I'm like, you know what? You're right. Like, this is an inherited thing that I have generationally with me, that my family never lived in the same house for a long time. So I feel like I should do that. Why? Question that, right? Like, he questions his money beliefs. They were very much like sock it away and save and, good fiscal responsibility type stuff. That's not how my family was. My family were like, oh, we got it burning a hole in the pocket. Let's go blow it on something. And so we've got hugely different inherited beliefs. And I'm like, we got to challenge those. We got to question those. We got to see like, okay, where does this come from? Like, here's a simple one I feel like a lot of people could relate to. When you have food left on your plate. I don't like clearing my plate. I don't like eating everything on my plate. Clive, it's almost an insult to him if I leave food on my plate.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
And it's so funny to me because I'm like, where do you think this belief comes from that either I'm ungrateful if I don't eat it or it's wasteful if I don't eat it? Where did that belief come from? And we sat and we had a really, deep conversation about something that simple, but that's a belief. Just like the kitchen has to be clean at night. Why? It's my house. Why do the dishes? Now, do I? Yeah, because for me, I like it. But there's so many people that put stress on themselves and put pressure on themselves because they're like, well, we have to have success in our life. And that looks like X amount of dollars in the bank account. Why? Where did that come from? Like the food belief or rule that people live by, a lot of times goes back to like the Depression.
Yeah.
It goes back to when people were having rations. We're not doing that now. So why is that belief still prevalent in our life? And why is it causing stress? And why are we allowing it to cause stress? Why are we allowing it to cause arguments?
Right.
And then that's being passed on to the kids. Then it's gone down another generation. And so like, we're really big on question when you feel a certain way. Like, why do I feel a certain way? Why does this trigger a reaction in me? And how can I look at that to see if it's even true? Like, what is this pain associated with this right now? Is this especially as a business owner, you might have apprehension about doing something. Why? Identify why. Like, I've talked to business owners and they're like, I get to like maybe June, July, and I feel limited. I don't really want to go and do more work. And I feel like I'm stuck. And I've dug deep with those people and gone, okay, where does this roadblock come from? Where does this belief come from? Where does this apprehension and anxiety stem from? And for one person, it was his father had earned X amount of money every year his whole life. And when this person, he was an agent, when he earned that much money, he felt like it was disrespectful to his dad to go earn more. And he had no idea he had this limiting belief. He had no idea until we dug deep on it. And it was fascinating to me. I'm like, do you even know that you're limiting yourself because you have this weird belief that it would be rude to your dad if you earned more money than him? He's like, no, I had no idea. I'm like, I bet if you asked your dad, he would not be unhappy with you if you went all in on yourself and your self-belief and your business and you earned triple. I bet your dad would be proud. But he had no idea because he had never questioned where this thought process came from. He had never questioned why he had this apprehension and where it stemmed from. You know, for business owners, I think it really comes down to like 3 buckets. You've got loss of the work that it's going to bring, right? You kind of fear that success and like, oh my gosh, if this happens, I'm going to be so busy. Like, yeah, the money's going to be great, but it's not all about money. So many people think success is money and it's just not. And then you've got just the work, you know, inside of it. Because you've got like this loss pain of like, well, what if I do all this work and then it doesn't work? And I've put all this energy into it and it doesn't work. And then, you know, your outcome pain of if it does work and that comes back on me. And then you've just got this fear of self-belief. Like, okay, is it just that I'm scared I can't do this? You gotta identify like which pain is it that I'm scared of right now? Am I scared it's going to work and I'm going to be inundated? Am I scared I'm going to do all this effort, it's not going to work? Am I scared I'm going to put the money out? Like, is it a financial thing? Is it a self-belief thing? Like, where is it? Where is it stemming from? And so many people just go, oh no, I feel apprehension from this. I'm not going to push forward and try and put myself out there. And they don't ever achieve what they could achieve because if they could just identify, this is where I'm scared. And even that, I feel like people go, I don't want to admit I'm scared of something. I'm not scared of something. I own my own business. Everybody's scared of something. It's what's kept us alive. It's why we're here. So just identifying it could give you this huge pathway to go, okay, so that's my fear. So has it happened yet? Is it true? Is it helpful to be scared of this? Most of the time the answer is no. Well, then do it anyway.
Right. I think I kind of addressed that in some earlier episodes. I kind of talked about imposter syndrome. I know I did 2 or 3 podcasts about overcoming. I did one about imposter syndrome, and I did one about being your. I can't remember the title of it, but it was about being your own, not enemy, but being something about being in your own way.
Yeah, like being your own worst critic, really, because that's what we are. We're so hard on ourselves.
Right. We don't give ourselves a credit for what we do, and we don't look for the positives and the shortcomings. And that was one of the key things that I put in there, especially when you're running your own business. And like you said, money isn't freedom. I mean, no, money isn't success. Freedom is success. It's in my opinion. And even trying to run a business, you got to take the small ones as big wins. So I, my online business, it's not moving as fast and it's not as profitable as I would like it to be. There's a lot of outside work that I have to do, a lot of ins and outs to it that I'm trying to master. But you know what? Last week I had a bunch of sales. I'm happy about it. I had a bunch of sales and I got it out there. But then I had a bad review. So I said, you know what? Let me address that review, get that out the way. Then I'll probably have a customer who will come back. And again, that's a small win, even though it was something bad, but it's a small win. But that's business. And you're not going to make everybody happy in business. You're going to have a critic. You're going to screw something up. That's going to happen. You're going to mess up a shipment.
And you just got to, and you got to choose to be okay with that. Like when you put yourself out there and you have more exposure, there is definitely more chance that this stuff's going to come back and someone's going to find something negative to say about it. Like I can't tell you, for years I lived in worry of getting a negative review. And then I finally got one and it was so unwarranted. It was funny. And I chose to look at it and go, they are absolutely nuts to have that perception of me. They are
Did you answer it?
Because No, I didn't know. I wasn't going to give it the time of day. I wasn't going to give them the satisfaction. I wasn't going to give it the energy because they and I both know what went down. And I know, just again, self-belief. I know what I did was the right thing to do. And this person wasn't even a client. Okay. This was a seller. I had a buyer. This was a seller that was mad that my clients didn't go through with buying their home. They had every right to not go through with the purchase. They had every right. Like, it's all very, very on the up and up in our contracts. And they chose to do more of a personal attack on me versus just taking a quick look at what would have turned the buyer off buying their home. But that just told me, like I say, I chose to look at it as kind of funny because it was a self-protection for me to just be like, this is not going to affect me. Like, this is kind of wild to me, in that they feel that this is acceptable to put this out there and to do that to somebody that they don't know and didn't even have a working relationship with. But to me, it was a huge sign of hurt people hurt people. And this was a huge self-reflection from them that they were portraying on me. And I was like, wow, what does this say about you guys? That you would be comfortable to say something like that to someone you don't even know. You know, instead of just letting my mind go, see, you're terrible at what you do. You don't know what you're doing. See what they said about you? Oh my God, everybody's going to read that. And everybody's going to know that you're faking it till you make it. And instead of letting my mind go down this dark, hole, I just like, you know what? For them to feel that way, I feel bad for what they must be going through. I feel bad for where their perception is coming from, but I cannot fix everybody. It is not my duty or my job to fix everybody, but I'm not going to add to it. I'm not going to add fuel to the fire and respond to them and let them turn around and be like, see, she doesn't even agree with us. See, why? It's not going to help anybody, right? So it's just this every single moment choice and choosing to see it as a win. In that moment, I did choose to see it as a win, that it didn't upset me. Like you said a second ago, your wins don't have to be any kind of size. Like, there are days when stuff out, especially when I'm sick, because, our kids are like petri dishes. And especially when I'm sick, I just have to really, really protect my mindset. And so I will have a notepad. I have a notepad on my desk at all times, and I have a notepad, and I'll just put one page on there and be like, today's wins. And it's every single thing. Even if it's like, I did what I was supposed to. I had breakfast. I remembered to have breakfast. That's a win. If I need tiny, tiny wins, I'm going to write them down. Because you got to protect your mindset. You got to train yourself to look for the good. Like, it's an easy, simple thing to start with. Driving and you hit traffic, it's a win. I've had my kid in the car and he's like, why is this a win? Wow, we're taking too long. The light's red. Wow. And I'm like, it's a win because what happens if there was a wreck? What happens if a dog was going to run down across the road? And this stopped me from being in that position right now.
Absolutely.
We don't know, but I'm going to choose to look because it's a color of a light bulb. Why would I let that upset me? You know what I mean? Like, it's just one of those things. This person chose to leave their house late, so they chose to cut me up and they chose to flip me the bird. Why would I let their crappy day take away from mine?
Right.
And so it's just, I saw an example, I don't know, I think it was like on Facebook or something, where they said however many minutes you have in a day. And so they kind of, I forget the exact example, they gave the person like this wad of cash. And they said, okay, let me take this, $100 bill or whatever it was. And they're like, why? And they're like, this is the 1 minute I'm going to take away from you where I'm negative in your day. And the person was like, okay. And they go, do you want to throw the rest of it at me? And the guy was like, no, I don't want to throw the rest of it. Well, then why would you throw your whole day away for 1 minute of bad?
Right.
And it's just all these little things that just, again, the universe having your back just keeps putting these examples in our way. Where I'm like, yeah, so right. Like, it's another great reminder. It's another great hint of how much control we have on how we look at everything.
Yeah. Kirstine, this has been an awesome conversation because once we get done recording, we're going to have a conversation too. I want to ask you a couple things before I let you go. If you had, so before I ask you this, remember what I was saying about my topic list? You ran
Yes.
through it.
Okay, good. I tried to peek at it and I was like, I can't read that while I'm in my little
Yeah,
mini rant. So,
everything was on there. You ran through it. So I'm like,
okay,
whatever. Yeah.
another
Yeah,
win.
that's a win for us. If you had to pick 3 big lessons from your journey, what would they be?
3 big lessons would be that if it's to be, it's up to
Mm-hmm.
me. Right? Everything's in my control. I can control whatever I want to control, or I can give up control however I
Okay.
want. So definitely that if it's to be, it's up to me. Another one is that there's just so many opportunities, like just to have that view of
Mm-hmm.
abundance in everything, in absolutely everything. And my husband will argue this, but even in like when the gas light comes on in my car, I choose to just have the view of abundance. Like, it'll be fine. I'll get home. He might not get back to town to fill it back up, but I got home.
Right, right.
And then I would say my third one is just so much struggle and so much stress and so much heartache and so much of the negativity in my life has come from opinions, and it's like my opinions on other things, on other people, on other
Mm-hmm.
situations, and also the value I've given other people's opinions on me and my life and my choices. And just realizing, again, kind of going back to if it's to be, it's up to me. I don't have to give their opinions any weight, and I don't need to show up with opinions. I just meet people where they're at, and all of that goes away.
Right, right. So let me ask you this. What's a mindset shift that you believe could help anybody listening today?
I think that this is not like something for the elites. This is something
Right,
everybody can implement. And it doesn't have to be in
right.
business, it doesn't have to be in money, it doesn't have to be if they do or don't have kids. This is just something that could make their day to day a little easier if they just realized it's up to me how I choose to respond to this. It's up to me how I choose to look at this. It's up to me the label that I give this. It's up to me the opinion that I put on this. Because once people, I think, realize that they can do that, even if it's something as simple like just road rage, for example, everybody I feel like can relate to that. We've had, we're in Texas, we have road rage deaths where someone pulls out a weapon and finishes that other person's life there and then because they chose to have an angry response. And I feel like we've all been there where someone cuts you up or someone's just rude to you or they're driving up next to you and they're, doing whatever. In that second, if you had the self belief and gave yourself that power to just say, it's up to me how I choose to respond to this, and you just, okay, you want to be angry at me? Okay. You want to be pissed that I'm doing 1 mile an hour under the speed limit and your opinion it's too slow? Okay. You want to flip me the bird? Okay. It doesn't matter, right? You choose to not give that any weight. You choose how to respond, or you can choose and rile the other person up. And you can jump right into that with them and put yourself in potentially a dangerous position. It's just not worth it. At the end of the day, you just got to decide, is it worth it? Are you going to live your dash? Are you going to make every day count? And if you are going to make every day count, does it count by spending the day upset by
Right.
these minor trivial things? Because it really doesn't.
Absolutely right. Kirsten, I appreciate you coming on the Elephant Wisdom podcast. This was a wonderful experience. This was definitely a beautiful moment because I learned a lot and I enjoyed speaking with you. And one thing that I always say, and I said it at the beginning of the podcast, and I really mean it in this podcast space, I acknowledge that you were a new friend, but in my opinion, you're now part of the family. So
I
make
appreciate
sure to
that.
tell everybody that Uncle Joe said hey.
I totally will. I totally will. And I appreciate the opportunity because, this is a newer focus for me to not necessarily step out of the real estate lane because I feel like that's just, it's a fantastic business that we've built. But I feel like getting on these podcasts and being accepted as a guest on these, it's a huge deal for me to be able to share some of what we've had work for us and what we've learned along the way to see if it could have that impact for someone else. And the more we do that, the less of that negativity is getting control of people, which is
Absolutely.
important.
Right. So go ahead. And so anybody who might want to reach out to you, might have some questions, especially someone looking for a home in the Dallas, Fort Worth, Texas area, just give them a way to reach out to you where they can contact you or any social medias.
Yeah, I mean, I'm on as many of them as possible. I'm mostly on Instagram, Facebook, and TikTok is where I spend most of my time. Everything is just under my name. Most people spell my name incorrectly, which is fine, but you won't find me if you do that. So everybody wants to call me Kirstine, but it is Kir. And once they know me for a minute, they'll go, oh, and I say it's pronounced Kirsten because she curses a lot. So once we get to like meeting number 2 or 3, they'll know that about me, and then it will make sense with how to spell my name. But yeah, I'm on all of those, and they can give me a call. They can pretty much find me on any platform, or just Google Openshaw Realty Group and they'll find me.
Okay. Well, all right. I want to thank you for coming on the Elephant Wisdom podcast once again, and want our listeners to continue to listen and make sure you like, follow, and subscribe. We're on YouTube and Spotify. We want everybody to remember that the Elephant Wisdom podcast is your podcast. This is your podcast for motivation, inspiration, and domination. So dominate or don't, it is purely up to you, and that is definitely what Kirstine came on to speak about today. She has chosen to dominate each day and has not faltered yet. And whatever path you're on, as we personally to make sure you pray along the way. If today's episode fired you up, make sure to reach out to the Elephant Wisdom Podcast. You can contact us on IG, Facebook, and X at Sons of SPP, Elephant Wisdom Podcast. Also, our sponsor, Sons of Spphillips. You can go to sonsofspphillips.com to see what we have in our store and get some good deals and everything like that. Make sure to keep following, keep liking, and keep dominating. Have a good day.